Hello, and welcome to the Kathleen Spracklin podcast. I am a woman on a mission to gather a cadre of writers, thinkers, and teachers who are transforming the world, one character at a time. And it all starts with one thing, a deep understanding of human motivation, why people do what they do, and the forces that drive them. To gain that understanding, I am mining the intersection of psychology, theology, and philosophy to make you a better writer. This is episode 108, Syntopical Reading into a Zettelkasten, the second source. We have been playing with syntopical reading, which is reading under Mortimer Adler's definition, it's reading more than one book at a time. We are doing it into a Zettelkasten, which permits us to unfold that and read books sequentially. And because we have a Zettelkasten to capture the ideas of the book, the two books can interact, two or more sources can interact just as powerfully in a sequential format as if we tried to do them both at the same time. So we laid down a foundational book. And the interesting thing about when you're laying down a foundational book, we talked about bib cards yesterday, it's very, very rare that you are laying down a foundational book. But when you are, that would be maybe the one time that you really would not need a bib card because your entire structure that you're building is based on that first source. Then we will interplay with that structure with the second and subsequent sources, which will make the whole Zettelkasten grow in richness and in liveliness, in the interplay of ideas and all of the excitement and benefits that derive from syntopical reading. So today we're going to add just one card into our Zettelkasten that we've been playing with. And with that one card, we'll already begin to see the power of syntopical reading and why it works perfectly to read the books sequentially or interleaved, your choice, but you're not limited only to reading them simultaneously. Okay, so here we're going to take a look at where we left off when we were building a foundational pattern, and we were just doing a simple reading, following the structure of this book and going straight to the taxonomy section. We started building that area out first simply because the structure was so very, very visible in that area. So where we ended up was we took a look at the first section where we said, okay, the taxonomy of the character traits on that page, and we noted that the character traits fell into 4 groups because we could clearly see the 4 groups on the page. And we also noted from earlier in the text that the grouping is based on the type of struggle that the character is facing. So when we created the next cards, we had to begin breaking down into the subgroups under the taxonomies. So, for example, we said the taxonomy, groups, not subgroups. The taxonomy is divided into 4 groups: resilience, balance, insight, and empathy. We saw the 4 groups displayed at the top of the page. We carried that structure into the Zettelkasten using the effortless numbering system, and we indicated those 4 groups. From there, we would break down the resilience group into subgroups, likewise the balance group. We would break them each into subgroups, from there down to the individual character traits, and from there down to the nature of the triad of emotions for each character trait. So the structure just unfolded before us, and we played with those cards. Now we're coming back to our first card that's arising out of another source. So let's take a look at that card. That card is deriving from the book Character Strengths and Virtues, and that is by Christopher Peterson and Martin Seligman. So because we have two authors, our nickname is the last initials of the last names of both authors, Peterson and Seligman, and then CSV for character strengths and virtues. So we've identified our source. It's about the nature of a taxonomy, and we took a quote from that book. A classification system should not be confused with a taxonomy, which is based on deep theory that explains the domain of concern. A taxonomy, this is not quoted, but just in our words, there's an underlying structure, and the taxonomy explains how the entries are related to one another. Okay, that's an interesting piece of information, and this is from the introduction, chapter 1, introduction to this whole big tome. So we notice, where are we going to put this card? Well, this one is on the nature of a taxonomy. It sure seems like the only card that we've got that relates to it is the taxonomy of the character traits up here. But when you look at those two cards, this is where the ideas start interacting. Here, there's just a declaration. The taxonomy is proposed. It's just laid out. Here's the taxonomy of the character traits for your consideration. And there's 4 groups, and their grouping is based on the type of struggle that the character is facing. And we played with those types of struggle. I'm not going to review them again tonight. By the way, they're on page 12 of the book, if you have the book and you want to review the natures of the struggles. And they're also available again, summarized in these 4 blocks. You can read the nature of the struggles. Okay, so now how do these two cards interact? And when you see how they interact, you've got 2 very interesting thoughts going on. One is very casual about it and just says, here's the taxonomy and here's what it's based on. And now you have other authors and their PhDs, and they're coming in and saying, whoa, be careful with that term taxonomy. Classification isn't the same as a taxonomy, and you've got to have a theory that explains the domain of concern, that provides an underlying structure and says how the entries relate to one another. So the natural question that is going to form in my mind, and I imagine in yours too, is, is grouping based on the type of struggle sufficient to establish a taxonomy? So I want you to notice what's just happened here. You've got a proposed taxonomy and some criteria for a taxonomy. There's a natural question. Does the proposed taxonomy meet the criteria stated in the other source? So before you even go any further with that, immediately you are being invited to open up the world of this. You've got somebody quoted, K.D. Bailey from 1994. You can go to the references in the back of the book. You can find where that's coming from. You can therefore find out, well, what did K.D. Bailey have to say about what it takes to have a taxonomy? You could open up other questions of, well, they give an example of a taxonomy based on the theory of evolution. Wasn't the theory of evolution simply proposed as a taxonomy? Observations were made, a theory was proposed. So the question is, where is taxonomy used elsewhere in science? I mean, just a whole wealth of questions opens up just with this one card. So you can see how powerful the interaction of multiple sources is going to be when you study 2 books together. One is comfortable saying taxonomy, the other one says be careful with taxonomy. And right away, you've got dynamism, you've got controversy, you've got suggestions for future investigation. If this is my field, so this excites me totally, but as long as you are reading in your field, this is going to happen. These ideas are going to come to life. So that's one key point. Okay, next key point. How are you going to number this card? Well, we've already determined that it goes next to this card. This is the only possible choice because we're building into this structure, and that's the only card in the structure that talks about taxonomy. So it's got to go next to 4D. Well, we've already got a lot of stuff next to 4D. We've got resilience, balance, insight, and empathy, the 4 groups that the taxonomy proposes. So, what do we do with this card? I think it's very easy because I'm talking about an effortless numbering system. So if I'm proclaiming an effortless numbering system, then I have to be ready to say, well, it's effortless. Duh. It's 5. The nature of a taxonomy comes right after 4. 5 comes right after 4. It comes right after the lists of taxonomies. To me, this is a no-brainer. It's effortless. And that's what the directory card does for us. It says all of these cards have an equal claim on being right next to 4D. 5 has just as much a claim as 1, 2, 3, or 4. And that, to me, is the power of the effortless numbering system. Because otherwise, and don't go this path, I don't think this is the path to go, there's a tendency amongst people who keep a Zettelkasten to say, well, wait a minute, resilience, balance, insight, and empathy are all of a certain type. They're all examples of elements in the taxonomy. And the other is the nature of the taxonomy. Clearly, the nature of the taxonomy comes first. No, there is no concept of first, because first only comes into play when you're making use of what you have on the card. And depending on your use of it, you might want the nature first, or you might want to come back to the nature after you've done all of your explorations. It's up to you. And as long as they're all there on the directory, you don't have to agonize over a number. It's just the next one, and they're all equally next to 4D. To me, this is so powerful because I want to keep my brain working on the nature of a taxonomy. I want to keep my brain working on, is struggle good enough? Is this going to cut it? And not be thinking about numbers. Those numbers have just got to happen automatically so I can make my card, ponder my questions, and move on. And consequently, I will say unequivocally, and I will debate anyone who says otherwise, that the number that belongs on this card is 4D5. And that is the lesson for tonight. Now tomorrow, we're going to play with this a little bit deeper, and we're going to say, okay, our authors here, Peterson and Seligman, have a few more words to say about taxonomies, and since this brought up a concern, it's worth following a little bit deeper into what they have to say about taxonomies, and maybe we will be motivated to do a little reading for information into taxonomies themselves to find out what are the test checkpoints. If we had a checklist of saying, yes, this qualifies as a taxonomy, what would we have to check off? So we'll play a little bit more with it tomorrow, but again with the idea of bearing in mind how this kind of a methodology of reading works in a Zettelkasten, and how it relates to the numbering, which by now should be duck soup. But what's really more important is how the ideas interact. And we're going to continue playing with this a bit tomorrow, because what we're going to see coming out of this is a little bubble structure forming. I hate to say bubble because Scott Shepherd likes to talk about bubble graph boys, so maybe the bubble is a bad word. But we're going to see a bulge developing in our Zettelkasten over a topic about the nature of taxonomy, which really isn't in the subject matter of writing with emotion. So this gives us a really, really interesting thing that we're going to want to explore and look into a little bit more. Okay, bye-bye.